You're in the water loop.
Welcome to Waterloop, the podcast that explores solutions for sustainability and equity in water. I'm the host, Travis Loop. This is episode number 226, Artistic Expressions of Jackson's Water Woes. Jackson, Mississippi has long struggled with inadequate water infrastructure, highlighted by a major treatment plant failure in 2022 that left 160,000 residents without safe drinking water. Lexus Giles, an artist from Jackson, reflects on these challenges through her work, Wading the Woes of Jackson Water. The exhibit features pieces that represent the struggles and adaptations of Jackson's residents in accessing clean water. In an interview conducted at the first ever gathering of the U.S. wash sector in Washington, D.C., Lexus discusses the habits her family developed to cope with the unreliable water supply, such as carrying plastic water bottles and adding bleach to bathwater. She explains how these personal experiences and the resilience of her community have influenced her art. Lexus, tell me about your childhood and growing up in Jackson and the water situation, what you had to do growing up there.
So I was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but my grandmother raised me, and when I was going to third grade, we moved to Jackson, Mississippi. Third grade, what I remember about third grade the most was, especially after the recent 2 years ago, the storm hit, it made me think about how often I saw boiling water advisories. And it made me think about my first experience of boiling water, where we were staying with my great grandma, Helen, in her house, and there was a hurricane or tornado, some natural disaster. And I helped grandma fill up cooking pots, from sink water and take it to the stove and boil it and then take it to the bathroom to dump it. We did it. I remember like 3 big pots and being dumped, or 1 big pot being dumped 3 times. But yeah, so I remember that. And then I remember how we added a cap of bleach to the tub. And I thought that was so normal. And I was taught by my aunts, which were my grandmother's siblings. So it's like my great aunt.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do remember drinking water and I knew it tasted funny, so we would put sugar in there and call it sugar water, but it didn't do much. It still tastes really, yeah.
Yeah. And so when the storm hit Jackson and the water system failed and so many people had to boil water for a long period of time, that sparked you, right? That sparked those memories. And then could you talk about how it sparked you to create art?
So, yeah, August 2022, I saw Jackson being broadcasted over all platforms, from televisions to even our cell phones. And it made me feel a little helpless because I'm far away. But I also think that I was, for the first time, able to look at a situation from the outside looking in. And it was like something that a trauma I had repressed resurfacing. It made me start looking at my habits and rituals of my everyday life now as an adult. And some of the things I noticed was how often I carried bottles of water. I keep cases of bottles of water in my house. And my peers and my roommates, my roommate has a filter where he just filters it from the sink. And then my peers and classmates, they carry canisters and they get water from the fountain, and I don't drink from the water fountain. And then it made me start thinking about like me washing dishes and how I keep a big pot in the sink and I fill it up, add a cap of bleach and washing detergent or dishwashing detergent, and I cycle that for the week. It just it started bringing those things up. And I was like, I thought they were normal until the people around me like, no, that's pretty weird. That's not normal.
Yeah. But it was habits that you carried from when you were a kid in Jackson with your grandmother and your great aunts. You know, the things they did so they had safe water. You were carrying that into your adulthood.
Yeah.
When Jackson, this crisis happened, it just brought all that back and made you look at what you were doing.
Yeah.
And then you decided to create art. Could you talk about your art and the different pieces that are part of it?
So my art piece consists of PVC plumbing that takes the viewers to the domestic space of a home. And it brings up the topic of infrastructure. It has Mississippi clay, which forms the cooking pots, the 5-gallon buckets, the water bottles, the milk jugs, and the replica of the plastic tote, which are objects my family and community use to either store or deals with water distribution of drinking water. And then there are crates and pallets made out of live oak wood, and they're referencing the material itself, live oak wood being this historical material for the Black community and slaves. Think about the Emancipation oak tree, which is a live oak. And also it was used to create slave ships. So it was just like having this conversation about the history of this infrastructure, regards to the Black body, and then this history of oppression and ways that it exists from the past to the present.
And on the big clay pots, you have words put on there. Could you talk about what those words are, where they come from?
So I started diving into my research, and because this was trauma. So it was me having to resurface this trauma, learn, remove some things, like this layering that happens, and the removal that also happens. And I started diving into the history, and I was looking for ways that the community fought back. Because originally I was like, it seems like the Black community, the working class, poor Black community has given up. But then I started looking into the research, and I found court documents with the NAACP where they fought back. They were fighting back against this. And they were they had residents that were contributing to this court document. And so I started reading it and highlighting parts that stuck out that kind of like summarized the whole paragraph. Like one was like, let's pull it up.
Yeah.
It says the root of the crisis is discrimination. And so I wanted to make sure that I wrote these things down so they remain permanent. They were written down in my head, my mind, but also putting them on ceramics and firing them. They're permanent now.
Yeah. And it's a very multimedia piece of art. You have audio also. What's that audio component?
The audio comes from my family. So I interviewed them and wanted to ask them to share their experience of what it's like dealing with water advisories and also dealing with the water crisis. And some of them talk about how like my grandmother and uncle talks about the hand pump that they had to carry, like go outside and physically pump to get the water during the 1950s. And my aunt, who's my grandmother's younger sister, born in the 70s, talks about like how she doesn't trust the water. She's never drunk the water. And who she feels like is more affected by it. And then I have some of my cousins that are around my age, to kind of give you this. I wanted to show a generational issue. Yeah. And they talk about ways that they get water when there's an advisory, which it comes from like communities like churches, distributing cases of water to them. Mm. And our family friend, he goes by the name Pookie, but he lives in the city, the city of Jackson. And so he expresses his frustrations of being neglected. He talks about what he sees, like his experience of seeing a pipe burst and the company's out there working on it, and he walks up to see what's going on, and he sees inside the pipes. Yeah. And how it was the worst thing he's ever seen in his life. So I wanted to be able to, this is me reflecting from my memory, but also I wanted to be able to allow the community, some of the community to speak for themselves. And I think that's kind of what helps the work, because it's so much, but it all kind of works. Yeah.
Yeah. So now that you have completed this piece of art, and it's been a process for you, a journey for you, how do you feel?
So I mentioned before that I felt like the community was numb. After doing this project, I realized the community is resilient, super resilient, because it's not being numb. I think they're aware of what's happening, but right now it takes more than just them to fix things. And they've learned how to continue to move through life and move through challenges of oppression. It's just, resilience. But when I got done, building it, I was telling some others, it's like, I hadn't slept in a few days. And I got done installing the work from my thesis show, and I was like, oh, I hate it. It's bad. And my professor's like, Lexus, go to sleep, go eat and go to sleep. And I went home, ate, slept, woke up, I looked at pictures, re-listened to the audio, and I broke down. And I cried, and I was like, it was like I had started healing. I started the healing journey, and I almost to the point where I stayed with the work. I got an extra gallery key, and I visit that body of work every day, and I didn't want it to leave, because the only place it existed was in my head and in my sketchbook. It's super personal.
Sure. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your story and creating that powerful art.
Thank you so much.
You're in the water loop. Water loop, water loop, water loop.